Hey guys, how's it going? Let's talk about WWE Most Wanted Treasures, the Nature Boy, Ric Flair's episode. I'm mainly talking about the butterfly robe that Ric Flair wore, if you remember, when he won the Royal Rumble and the WWF/WWE Championship for the first time. This episode was a double episode of Most Wanted Treasures, but it was only based around the Nature Boy Ric Flair and his family, including Charlotte and his son-in-law, who I'll talk about in a second, Conrad Thompson. For those that are unaware and do not know, Conrad Thompson is a wrestling fan, wrestling memorabilia collector. He is also a insurance, salesman, or he owns an insurance company. But more than that, he is the son-in-law of Ric Flair. He's also a podcaster who does podcasts with various legends and personnel within the professional wrestling business. I would like to basically call out, I wish I could name and shame this individual, but the person who purchased the Ric Flair robe online for $10,000 and then went on to sell this robe back to the actual person who paid for it originally, who didn't sell it, it was left in a hotel. He went on to sell this item back to the Flair family and the WWE for $125,000. Conrad Thompson himself put $75,000 into this robe. The WWE put the other $50,000 into this robe. The man who sold this, you are the scum of the earth. There is no denying this. Everybody has to make profit when they are doing the job that they are doing. But people like that make me sick. He knew how much this robe meant to the WWE. And according to this individual, he bought the robe because the person who sold it individually online was actually selling it because he wanted to pay for funds towards his family's funeral. And I'm sure he would have liked to have known that the person who resold this sold this for about 12 times the price that he got for it. Because he could have received $75,000, $80,000 from the WWE. They were willing to pay right at the top end of what this thing was worth. It was worth between $50,000 and $70,000 or $50,000 and $90,000, should I say. I can't believe it, guys. I'm stumbling a little bit on my words here. And this was obviously something that took place towards the end of the episode. But nonetheless, I have to talk about that first, because I am actually quite shaken up by that. The shysters that are in the wrestling business are bad enough. Never mind the shysters that are not in the wrestling business, but are still attempting to rip off people in the wrestling business. The person who sold that cannot be a true fan of professional wrestling. The fact that you knew that you could basically ask whatever you wanted as your asking price, and you went as far as to mess around actual legends of professional wrestling. The guy agreed to sell the robe for $50,000, to swap the robe for a $50,000 robe, and I'll get to this bit in a second, alternative robe that was known as a non-Olivia robe, because these robes are made by a female called Olivia. She is, I believe, an Irish-born female that was contracted by people like Ric Flair, or contacted, should I say, by people like Ric Flair to make these robes, these classic wrestling robes that you guys have seen throughout the years. You'll know that Ric Flair wears the robes. It's not always the same robe, it's different robes. They are custom made. But not all of them are made by Olivia. And there was one robe that was made by somebody else that was called the Jungle Robe. And it had pictures of lions and tigers and various different cats from the feline and cat world. Charles Robinson, the former or the current referee for the WWE, the former WCW referee, and the former actual professional wrestler, he owned this robe, or he had this robe. I don't know how he got hold of it. He had it. And you could tell he cherished this. Not only was he in tears because he didn't want to mess up the show and he didn't want to upset Ric Flair, but he didn't want to give up the robe, and he chose to, in the end, swap the robe with the WWE, because this was a three-way swap. The WWE gave him another custom-made robe, and then he gave WWE the jungle robe, and then WWE was supposed to swap the jungle robe and a pair of $15,000 Ric Flair boots for the butterfly robe. The man himself who agreed to this was a third-party seller. He was selling on behalf of somebody else, and he let the family know the sad news that unfortunately the person himself had done his research, meaning he'd obviously learned that these were willing to basically pay what they were asking, and he then bumped up the price to $25,000. The $50,000 robe, the jungle robe, and the $15,000 boots. Conrad Thompson agreed to this. The man who was selling then told his third-party seller to inform the family in the WWE that he wanted a little bit more cash. So they asked him what his price was, and he said $50,000 to Conrad Thompson once again, because he had stated multiple times in the past that he was willing to pay the asking price no matter what. He then agreed to this. $50,000, the $50,000 jungle robe, a $15,000 pair of Ric Flair custom-made boots. That's $115,000 in total. And yes, if you are wondering, did he ask for more money after this? Yes. They offered him $60,000, $50,000 jungle robe, and the $15,000 custom-made boots. All in all, $125,000 worth of merchandise and cash. The person who sold this, you are literally the scum of the earth. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You have no loyalty to professional wrestling. I'm going to be honest, guys, this truly made me sick to my stomach to see this, to see how desperate the Flair family was to get this back. Shout out to Conrad Thompson for actually purchasing this, being the main benefactor to this. I'm sure WWE would have choked up more money in the end, or, leveled it out. But my word, this was disgusting for something that the man had paid $10,000 for, not but 3 months before. It seemed maybe 3 to 6 months before. This was disgusting. I mean, I'm going to be honest, guys. I've seen some things and I've seen some shysters in my time. It was obvious as well, and WWE wanted you to know this, that the person who was selling on behalf of the actual owner of the robe, you could tell he was a shyster as well. He was the person who figured out that WWE practically would pay anything for this. As a wrestling fan, and as a long-time wrestling fan, and as a person who does wrestling on YouTube, I am truly disappointed by these actions. It truly goes to show that there is nothing sacred in wrestling anymore. Charles Robinson, the guy was in tears because he had to give up something that actually meant something to him as part of this, to find out later down the line that the company was basically bumped up by some shyster. It's disgusting. But I'm not going to go on about that any longer, guys, because I've gone on way too long about the shyster. This is a must-see episode of WWE Most Wanted Treasures. This could have been the finale for all I know, with it being a double episode. It was clearly filmed in 2 different parts. They clearly tried to find the robe, couldn't find it, like the WCW World Television Championship. And once again, if you have possession of that or know who has possession of that, please come forward. And they filmed the second part after they found out about the person who had purchased it. Once again, this is a must-see episode. There isn't anything left for me to say. I'll be watching if there is any more episodes of this, and I'll be looking forward to future ones. Please like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more.